Greetings and salutations. Lot to cover today. Lefty Lucy and Guy Fawkes coming at you. Today's August 15th, the day that Putin and Trump met. So much to go over on that. I was just with some friends and somebody said they saw Putin and Trump in the U.S. limo together, and I asked, but in a very crude way, was Trump performing oral sex on Putin? And that's about how I feel about Trump's relationship with Putin. It goes way back into the 80s, and all the money that Putin's funneled into Trump and his businesses and campaigns and everything. But that's for a whole other day. Actually, this last week's been a bit of a challenge. It was one of those weeks I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and just kind of wanted to do both simultaneously. It's like, ooh, did I turn bipolar in my old age? And it's like, nope, we put Trump in the effing White House. That'll do it for you. In terms of mood swings and some of the topics that I wanted to cover. By the way, I cannot help but getting into, even though it wasn't my intention to do this on this particular video, was getting into yesterday what Gavin Newsom did with wanting to put the redistricting of the voting districts on the ballot for November, and he's holding it over Texas's head. And unless they firmly, and other states, it becomes clear that other states aren't going to do that, he will probably go through with it. And I was never a fan of him, and I'm not sure I'd ever want to see him as president. I mean, he's got a lot going for him, he really does, but I think he's made some, in my opinion, massive errors in judgment on his podcast. However, he's in there pitching, and I guess that's all we can be doing because of all the politicians that weren't in there pitching, that weren't fighting back, that weren't trying anything. They're just going, oh, we aren't in power. What can we do? You know, what do you want me to do about it? Well, all of those politicians that I keep calling you and sending you messages, I hope I'm being really clear about what I would like you to do about that. I had to reach up here because my cat jumped on the thing that's holding my Kindle, so I was sure she was going to knock that off. Boy, the situation in DC with the police, which having the National Guard, supposedly Trump can only do that for 30 days legally. We'll see where that goes. I mean, he couldn't be bothered to call in the National Guard on January 6, 2020, but yeah, it's so important because Big Balls got an attempted carjack and was beaten up. It's like, wah, wah, wah. Sorry. And I'm going to bring up something that's dear to my heart, and I don't have any solutions on this, but I find it appalling and always have, that we are so harsh on the homeless. Like a lot of the videos that I saw when they were getting ready to clear out the homeless encampments near the throughway where Trump passed them, and they were all in tents and stuff. It was very, very neat and orderly, no trash, yada, yada, yada. However, the day before or something, I mean, officials could have come in and said, you know, who knows, it could have come down in the last week or so that they really needed to clean it up. But I mean, compared to a lot of tent encampments that I've seen, like for instance, videos of ones in and around Seattle. It was really very, very neat. But my concern is what in the hell is going to happen to these people? Supposedly, the social services agency in and around DC says that they have found beds, which is temporary shelter for these people. But you have to know the reality is so many of these shelters are not a safe place as compared to being on the streets. And I don't know what the answer is, but it's a huge problem and it's getting bigger. And it's not just people with serious mental health issues, although that's been a staple of the homeless community for decades now. And people with serious drug issues. Those are both things. But it's becoming so much more mainstream now in terms of homelessness. I mean, in families and everything else, because of the price of housing. You know, the fact that so many people in this country are spending up to 50% of their monthly budget on housing. And that's not like living in someplace fancier beyond your means. I used to originate mortgages for a living, and I mean, the debt ratio for your housing was and still is always maximum 30% of your income should go to housing. And actually, because I'm an old fart, back in the day it was 25%. But that was back in the day when, you know, I mean, like, for one thing, you really didn't need health insurance as much if you're younger. Medical, getting, you know, medical help was not outrageous. Prescriptions weren't outrageous. I mean, these things could take a hit on your budget, but I mean, car insurance was cheap, and I mean proportionately. I don't just mean like, oh, going back to the times when a loaf of bread was 5 cents. Well, yeah, you go back to when a loaf of bread was 5 cents, and you could buy a really decent family house for less than $10,000 in a good, you know, a good neighborhood with decent schools. I mean, you know, so everything was lower, but proportionately, those things are much higher. You know, like your car expenses, the cars themselves, the repairs, and that's not dumping the blame on the manufacturers or the repair places. I mean, everybody's got to make a living, but we've gotten to a point in this country where the profits have to be proportionately higher for most corporations, they feel, in order to stay in business, because their first and foremost responsibility is to their shareholders, not their customers, but to their shareholders. So that's another thing I wanted to bring up. Ghislaine Maxwell, and let's not forget this, you know, Epstein file thing. It's important, but it's not as important in terms of fighting back as so many other issues. But it could be the thing that's going to hang Trump. And as we know, if we hang Trump, and I don't mean literally hang Trump, I mean get him out of office, whatever, we aren't going to like what's coming up behind him either. But that's what we'll have to deal with at that time. And by the way, put a note on your calendar, the 13th of October, the Supremes, as I like to call them, assholes, not all of them, the Supreme Court is going to be going over the Voting Rights Act, and hopefully will uphold that. We cannot lose any more rights to voting than we already have. And it's bullshit when people try to tell you that, you know, undocumented immigrants are voting. That's horseshit. Only American citizens can vote and do vote. And if you really go back and look at the rolls, you're going to find that that's what's voting. But a lot of your far-right people that want to get rid of everybody of effing color in this country are trying to make it harder and harder for people of color and poor people to vote. And that is just crap. And by the way, speaking of that, I've seen a bit of a trend towards wanting to give 16 and 17-year-olds the right to vote. I'm not a fan. 18-year-olds, I think, should have the right to vote. No, I really am not a fan at all. I mean, if you're really into it politically and you're 16 and 17 years old, get out and work for campaigns and do some other work. It just doesn't. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, if we start having wars and we're drafting 16 and 17-year-olds, well, then they should have the right to vote, and God forbid that ever happens. One other quick thing I'm going to touch on today, which isn't even a quick thing, is alligator Alcatraz. And I haven't checked on this in a couple days, but from some news sources, and one of them is very radically left, it's called Status Quo. But I heard an actual phone interview that one of the reporters was doing the interview with the wife of one of the detainees in alligator Alcatraz. He did not speak English, so the reporter was on the phone asking the wife the question. The wife would translate it, and the husband would usually go into a lot of detail. Well, the husband has been hospitalized a couple times, and my best guess, because he's got a respiratory ailment, is that he may have COVID. Well, what has happened is that he said they have cleared out almost all the detainees out of alligator Alcatraz, and all the ones that are left, if I'm not mistaken, are either in one or two maybe of the cages. And each person, each detainee that is left has a wristband stating what symptoms they have, like if they've got the respiratory symptoms, or if they've got the stomach flu type symptoms and diarrhea, which, I've heard could be something from, the unsanitary conditions there. It could be the food. But it's a perfect breeding ground for a norovirus, like the stuff you get on cruise ships. But who knows what's going on there and where that's going to lead. But thank you for coming by. Please share this if you think you know anybody that might be interested, especially somebody left-leaning and that's older, because we are kind of isolated, a lot of us, from other people, politically, because we're also of the boomers of the generations where you don't bring up politics, and a lot of us don't even know how other people think and feel politically. I know where the people where I live are like bunch of Trumpers. What a bunch of morons. I even had a lady the other day, we were talking about food stamps and stuff, and she goes, well, they aren't cutting food stamps for people. They're just the government's just going through and cutting, and she did not use these words, waste, fraud, and abuse. But I can't remember what she said, but it was two words that equated to the waste, fraud, and abuse. And I usually I won't engage with these Trumpers on this, but I just stopped short and said, no, they haven't found any waste, fraud, and abuse, and they didn't even systematically go through files and audits to find the waste, fraud, and abuse. Musk just went through with an effing machete and just cut the tops, the bottoms, any place he felt like cutting out of anything, including FEMA, and now they're going through and destroying the rest of FEMA. My cat's looking at me when I did that growl. But on that note, I think I'll get ready for bed and chill out. Please like, subscribe, share with anybody that, might be interested in this, and we'll get through this together. Just you and I and Guy Fawkes. Have a good one.